Hello, it's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight, live from Glasgow for a special programme. Coming up, we'll be finding out what matters most to people here in Scotland with 1 week to go until polling day.
I don't see a climate of oh, there's a big wall of change happening.
They all kind of seem a bit out of touch.
It is tricky, but I'd like change at least.
On the show this evening, we're going to be joined by a panel of young voters talking about the issues that could decide their vote, as an exclusive poll for Sky News shows Labour edge ahead of the SNP. We'll find out just how big a role the cost of living is playing in this election, hearing from a local business and a personal finance expert. And we'll be speaking to one of the artists behind Glasgow's mural trail, using public art to transform some of the city's previously unloved spaces. All that's come, and much more, on the UK Tonight. Hello, a very good evening to you from St Luke's and the Winged Ox, a music and arts venue here in Glasgow. We're going to be talking to voters from the city throughout the show this evening, with just 1 week to go now until the nation goes to the polls. But before we get on to all of that, we're going to take a look at the stories that have been dominating the headlines the course of the day. Let's first start with the trial of a man accused of plotting to kidnap and murder Holly Willoughby. The trial has heard from an undercover police officer today who posed as a would-be accomplice online. The officer told the court that he engaged with security guard Gavin Plum because he believed there was an imminent threat to the TV presenter. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt has this report.
It was Shakespeare who wrote that the course of true love never did run smooth.
Late last year, Holly Willoughby was in real danger of being kidnapped and murdered, an undercover US police officer told the court. She was, he said, the target in an online chat room called Abduct Lovers. He'd seen a message, he said, that read, "I have a load of info on her. I know when she does and don't have security, and that she doesn't have CCTV at home, what time she gets up in the morning." On a video link, the anonymous officer told jurors, "I felt there was an imminent threat to that individual at that time." The message was sent by security guard Gavin Plum, says the prosecution. The undercover officer engaged with him and said Plum revealed his plot and more.
Hands and ankle shackles, ring and ball gag.
The officer said he found all this quite alarming. He asked Plum to identify himself with a code word and was sent this.
3rd of the 10th, 2023, Holly.
Plum was arrested at his Harlow home after the FBI was called in and alerted the Metropolitan Police. The defence barrister wondered why the undercover officer hadn't asked Gavin Plum more about his plot. For instance, why hadn't Plum personally scoped out Miss Willoughby's home? How was he going to transport her? And where was he going to dispose of her body? Sasha Wass, KC, said, "You did not feel like stepping back and re-evaluating whether this was a credible plan or complete nonsense?" I asked him several times in the conversation if this was fantasy, and he replied that it was not. He was supplying detail that led me to believe it was a credible plan, and I believed it would be carried out without my services. Plum sent the officer pictures of what he said was chloroform to knock out Miss Willoughby. Bottles were found at his home, the court was told, but no chloroform was detected. Plum's defence is expected to start in the morning. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at Chelmsford Crown Court.
Rishi Sunak has repeatedly refused to say whether he told his parliamentary aide, who is now under investigation by the Gambling Commission, about the date of the general election. Craig Williams is one of 5 Conservatives known to have been caught up in this inquiry, and the party has withdrawn its support for him as a candidate. Well, today the Prime Minister wouldn't be drawn on whether he confided in Mr Williams before announcing the election date.
Prime Minister, you know the answer to the question of whether or not you told Craig Williams. You cannot prejudice an investigation. You can only prejudice a jury trial. You absolutely can answer this question.
No, it's absolutely not right Well, there are ongoing independent investigations that those are compromised in any way, shape or form. They are rightly confidential. They are rightly confidential, and it's important that they stay that way, and that's the right thing to do, and you know that. You know that. We've done internal inquiries of our own.
That is not true. You can only prejudice.
We have done internal inquiries of our own.
You know the answer to the question whether or not you told Craig Williams.
We have done internal inquiries
yes or
of
no.
our own, and as a result of those, have suspended candidates.
Well, let's bring you the full candidate list for the Montgomeryshire and Glendaw constituency. See the list of candidates on your screen there. Well, we are live in Glasgow tonight. It's the final stop on our tour around the nations of the UK ahead of the general election. Here in Scotland, in this election, like many before it, there's one topic that's always on the table, the question of independence. But for some voters, there are other more pressing issues, things like health and the cost of living. The SNP has been the dominant party here for more than a decade now. At the last election, it won 48 of Scotland's 57 seats in Westminster, but now it too looks to be under threat from Labour. That's something that has played out in an exclusive YouGov poll for Sky News, which has Labour edging ahead to 35% of the vote, with the SNP on 29%. Well, we're joined this evening by a panel of young voters, and we're going to get their thoughts on that a little later in the programme, and of course the issues that matter most to them ahead of polling day next week. But first, I'm pleased to say we're joined by our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillis. Conor, it's so good to be
Welcome to
on
Glasgow.
your manor. Thank you very much. We're a lovely music and arts venue where we've had to ask them to turn the music down so we can have our conversation here tonight with the good people of Glasgow and your good self. Let's start by talking about the bigger picture. What position does Scotland start from in this general election?
Well, do you know, SJ, this is the first election in more than a decade that feels different. It feels like there's a competition going on north of the border at the moment. And let's just talk through some of the issues with the parties, because the SNP have clearly had their issues with the police investigation looking into its funding and finances. It's on its third First Minister here in Scotland in little over a year. And clearly it's fighting this election amid the backdrop of being in power here in Scotland for almost 2 decades. The Conservatives, well, their leader said he was going to resign in just a couple of weeks' time, and slap bang in the middle of this election. And, you know, there is a bit of oomph within the Labour camp, considering what the polls are saying, including that exclusive one from Sky News. But they are in a tricky position in the northeast of Scotland, because they're the only party in this election that are saying that they are not in favour of new oil and gas licences, a big jobs issue in the northeast of Scotland. So, yes, this is the first time in a long time that it feels like it's all up, all to play for.
I'm sure we will talk about it with our various panels we have this evening, but independence. Independence, of course, will come up in the course of the discussion ahead of any election, whether it's, you know, the general election or the Scottish elections. What's the standpoint on independence for people going to the polls next Thursday? How does that feature in this election?
Well, clearly it's been a huge issue, and it's something that is run through all of the debate, all of the discussion north of the border ever since that referendum in 2014. It's an issue that is continuing to come along, and that's because the SNP clearly have won every election north of the border ever since. But if we take away the main devolved issues like education, housing, income tax, independence, at the moment, the polls are suggesting is still sitting at 50-50 support. The country is still split. But what's interesting at this election is that the polls are suggesting a drop in support for the SNP. So the question is, where is that support going? Is it switching to Labour this time around? And the independent strategy from the SNP is difficult, because it knows that it cannot deliver an independence referendum without Westminster saying so. Both Labour and the Conservatives, either party likely to take the reins at Downing Street next week, have said they will not enter those negotiations. So where does the SNP go next? And that's what's been a really tricky part for them in this election contest so far.
Well, look, Conor, there's so much to talk about. We're cramming it all into to an hour tonight, I want to talk to you about immigration, because that is a big topic here in Scotland, as it is throughout the UK, but Scotland are taking a slightly different view on it. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But Connor, for the moment, thank you. Now, throughout the election, our home editor, Jason Farrell, has been travelling across the country with a parliamentary bench, offering voters the chance to take a seat and tell us what's important to them. Well, this time he has been in Edinburgh, speaking to wild swimmers and hikers.
Wild swimmers in the sculpted gardens of Jupiter Artland near Livingston. A free-spirited, hardy bunch. And the politics among the women we spoke to here leaned towards Scottish independence.
Oh, it's lovely. Oh. I'm just back, like many Scots, from 2 weeks in Germany, watching the football. And what struck me really clearly there was that there are so many small countries in Europe, the same size as Scotland or even smaller, that are doing really well, and Scotland should be running itself.
After independence, there's no need for the Scottish Nationalist Party. It's done its job to get independence, and then we can vote Labour, Liberal, Green, Conservative, any other variety of politicians, because the whole point is for Scotland to be able to manage its own political affairs.
But the director of this outdoor sculpture world thinks only Labour can bring the change she wants to the political landscape.
We've had SNP in Scotland for the last 12 years, and we've had the Tories in Westminster, and I know that the arts are on their knees in a way that they've never been before.
The SNP has been sinking in the polls since the departure of leader Nicola Sturgeon, then Humza Yousaf, following his broken alliance with the Greens. The nationalist dominance in Holyrood is less formidable, and that will be reflected in this election.
There's 57 seats up for grabs in Scotland, and in the last election, Labour got just one of them, the SNP 48. For a long time, the prospect of Labour becoming the largest party in Scotland seemed about as likely as someone hauling this parliamentary bench to the top of Edinburgh's highest hill.
But a more fractured SNP makes their goal of breaking up the union seem more distant, and Labour's ambitions of reconquering Scotland more plausible. Like these Scottish students carrying our bench up Arthur's Seat, or the hikers we met on our trail above Edinburgh, people here have other priorities.
Looking for a party or leader that best represents my views, you know, reducing taxes, especially with the cost of living crisis at the moment, as well as helping, you know, my sort of generation get on the property ladder.
I wouldn't say I'm struggling, but I know a lot of people are, and that is why I tend to vote Labour, because it's not even so much for the position I'm in, but a lot of the population.
You think they help people out more?
Yeah.
With Labour having a real chance of beating the Conservatives, Scots are more likely to vote for them, whether they want an independent Scotland or not.
For the first time in my life, I'm voting for Labour. Just look to your whatever left.
Yeah.
And you can see what's happened in Scotland with not having Labour in power. It's a filthy, filthy weather. Filthy politics.
You're pointing at Holyrood, you're pointing at the Scottish Parliament.
I'm pointing at the Scottish Parliament.
And why? What's filthy about it?
If we were in America, we'd be shouting, "Drain the swamp."
Like Scotland's unpredictable climate, the political weather here seems to be changing. And now anything is possible. Jason Farrell, Sky News, Edinburgh.
And we're no bench here. We've got bar stools, though. That'll do. Let's bring in our panel of young voters for this evening. I'm joined here by Barnwell Carley, who is 26 and a scientist based here in Glasgow. Keir Davison is here as well, a student doing a Masters in English Literature. And Ailey Rowe, who is a 21-year-old journalism student at the university here in the city. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for coming down to talk to us. Barnwell, I'll start with you first. It's a week to go until polling day in this general election. Is this something that you and your mates are talking about? Is there a level of excitement or interest even in this general election?
I really feel like this election there's not a lot of interest. I feel like a lot of my friends sort of don't know who to vote for right now. There's no one that sort of stands out, that pops. They see a lot of the manifestos and they think it just sounds like the same old kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been hearing that a lot from the people I've been speaking to in Glasgow to date. not being able to differentiate between the parties and the leaders on offer. Ailey, what are you making of this campaign so far? We've only got 1 week to go. Is there any party, any politician, any policy that has cut through to you?
I'm not too sure. I always wanted to vote like independence, because independence is something that's really been important to me. But the SNP, like, obviously have had a lot of issues in the last couple of years, and I'm not a huge John Swinney fan. Like, there was obviously that SQA thing that went on a couple of years ago, which affected me and a lot of my peers. So I'm really not sure who I want to vote for, because there's nothing that I really feel like speaks to young people that speaks to young people in a way that really affects me.
Yeah. You make an interesting point there, Keir. I was out and about in Glasgow earlier on talking to people, and I met a young woman called Libby, and she was saying she felt that politicians were very good at talking to her parents, her grandparents. They weren't very good at talking to young people, and what she said was, you need to invest in us, because we're the future. We're the people that are going to keep you in power or take you out of power in the years to come, and you're not really addressing the issues that matter to us, things like the cost of living, housing. Is that how you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the politicians nowadays, it kind of feels like instead of different parties with different values, it's all just different agendas, and everyone's sort of jostling for power, but no one's really committing to what they say, and no one really seems to have the interests of young people at their heart. It's all just about what they think will get them votes, basically.
Seen that year after year, there's been a lot less young people voting. Do you know what I mean? So people aren't taking interest, and I feel like politicians should maybe value younger people more, because ultimately it's the younger people that are going to, you know, come into power in the next few years as well.
We have been talking to young voters panels around the UK in the build-up to this election, and after the general election was announced, there was an uplift in voter registration for under 25s. Are the young people of Scotland, do you think, going to turn out in this election? Because it counts for nothing registering if they don't turn out on polling day, Ailey. What's the sense you're getting from your friends?
I do feel like a lot of my friends are a lot more interested in this general election than they have been in the past. I mean, I know, like, all my friends are girls, obviously, and they feel like they should vote because, obviously, they've campaign for the right to vote all across the world, and
why are they more interested in this election, do you think?
I think
what's got to them?
I think it's really down to social media. I think it's really pushed out on social media a lot this election. It's been sort of covering Twitter, Instagram for months, so I feel like they can't really avoid it, maybe the same way that they used to. And I know a lot of my friends are like coming to ask me like for advice on how to vote, because they've never really done it before.
That's interesting. Keir, they're coming for you. They're coming for you on TikTok, but are they coming for you with the right thing? Because I know that you've got a petition running for a simple measure, which is the subway here in Glasgow to stay open late on a Sunday, which it doesn't. And it's those kind of simple measures that have a big impact, that directly affect your life and make it easy to go out or to get to work.
Yeah. I mean, for the subway petition, it's also just a case of public safety. I mean, Glasgow is a really friendly city, but it is also a city. And I unfortunately know friends of mine who have had quite scary experiences. But it's also a case of money. The subway is one of the cheapest ways of getting around the city. If you don't have a bus pass, it's cheaper than taking the bus. And £2 or £3 to some people might not sound like much, but for a lot of people who are getting back home from work and they're having to pay that every single week or every single day, it makes such a huge difference. That's £2 or £3 that could go towards food or to other essentials that you don't have a choice about buying.
I mean, and that's an interesting point, isn't it, Aileen Barnwell? I'm interested to get your thoughts on that. In terms of, there are simple things that can be done that can make your lives easier, whether it's to do with job opportunities for younger people, opportunities in general, something to help with the cost of living. Do you feel that they're tapping into that, or are they talking about, you know, the big plans? You hear about tax plans, and I know a lot of people, not just young people, switch off. They don't understand how it's actually going to affect their bank balance, how it's going to, you know, feel when they hand over their debit card.
Yeah. No, definitely. I feel like a lot of the issues that are being addressed right now aren't lots of the issues that are inherently that young people have. It's sort of maybe to do with, like you said, tax and sort of what older people want to hear. Yeah, that's what I feel anyway.
Well, like obviously the SNP brought in the free tuition fees and the free bus passes for under 22s, and for me personally, I use my bus pass every single day because I commute to uni, so I get the bus into Glasgow every single day, and it would cost me like £10 to £15 every single day if I was to get the bus, which I just don't have. So that bus pass has like really saved sort of me getting into uni. Especially with like rent prices and everything, like living in Glasgow is just not really an option at all for me. Like the rent prices that my friends pay, it's insane, and like trying to pay that on top of a bus fare would be insane.
I feel like Scotland does actually do a really good job for sort of younger people, especially like with what you said. If you're under 21, you've got free access to bus travel, which helps a lot of younger people as well, because I know in England they've not got that sort of system, so Scotland does do a good job.
Doing all right for the young people when it comes to that. Can I just ask you, we've got 7 days to go. Are you undecided? Do you know where your vote's going? Is there something that's happened to change where your vote is going? I'll start with you first, Keir. 7 days to go.
It's more of a case of I know where my vote isn't going, but unfortunately it feels that nowadays you're not necessarily voting for who you want the most, but rather voting against who you want the least, which I think is a really sad state of politics right now. At the moment, I still am not 100% sure who I will vote for on the day, but I know who I won't vote for.
Yeah, I'm hearing that from so many people over the last few weeks. What about you, Ailey?
Yeah, I'm probably about 90% sure about who I'm going to vote for, but I guess it will probably depend on what happens within the next week. If anything.
So there's still time.
Yeah.
There's still time for your vote's up for grabs, perhaps.
See what happens in the next week and see if anything sticks out to me where I'm like, okay, I'll go for them over them.
Okay, Palmer?
Yeah. And I'm more of the same. Nothing's really jumping out at me. It's like more of the same. When I read the manifestos, there's nothing there that sort of jumps out at me. But
But it's important to go out and vote, right?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, listen, Farnwell, Keir and Ailey, thank you so much for your time talking to us here on the UK Tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you. I just want to bring you a bit of breaking news. This is coming from the Metropolitan Police this evening. The Met saying they have arrested 6 people that it believes are key organisers for Just Stop Oil, who were planning to protest at airports this summer. Now, the arrests were made during an event at a community centre in East London this evening. The 6 people detained under a section of the Public Order Act, which makes it illegal to conspire to disrupt national infrastructure. More on that as we get it. So 6 Just Stop Oil protesters arrested this evening. Now we'll have details of that YouGov poll carried out exclusively for us here at Sky News, which suggests Labour is in the lead here in Scotland. And also coming up, we'll be discussing the most important issues according to Scottish voters, including healthcare and education. Also, rejuvenating streets and revitalising buildings. We'll take a look at Glasgow's murals.
They have breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Hello, you're watching the UK Tonight, live from Glasgow. Now, the SNP has been the dominant force here in Scotland for more than a decade now. Of the 57 seats in Westminster up for grabs here in the last election, the SNP won 48 and Labour only 1. But if the polls are to be believed, all that looks to be changing. Here's Sky's Ashna Hurnag with the data.
With a week to go, YouGov have conducted an exclusive Sky News poll for us here in Scotland, and the results are revealing. The biggest takeaway is the narrowing of the polls between Labour and the SNP. Just look how tight it is. YouGov has Labour on 35% and the SNP on 29%. If this plays out, it would only strengthen a Labour majority. But take a look at the Conservatives, a mere 11%, lagging behind so much they're parallel with the Lib Dems. That's a pretty catastrophic position for a party who are the official opposition at Holyrood. And speaking of Holyrood, that election may not be until 2026. But when asked how people would vote in their constituency if this were a Scottish Government election, the parties at the top switch. Up until last Tuesday, 28% said they would vote SNP and 24% said Labour. This tells us Scots not only treat these elections differently, but it suggests a protest vote after not only frustration with 14 years of a Conservative government in Westminster, but also with an SNP that's had a chaotic leadership over the past 18 months. But so many are still undecided. YouGov figures show 14% of people have changed how they plan to vote over the past 4 weeks. The campaign period has clearly not cemented everyone's votes. And of those, 37% say it was down to how the parties and their leaders have conducted themselves. Voters are watching every move, including how parties will act on what matters to them the most. On that decider, YouGov tells us for people in Scotland, it's the NHS. Ranked the #1 issue for voters in this election, with 60% saying this will determine how they cast their ballot. That's despite the NHS being a devolved issue, and whoever walks into number 10 won't have an impact on how healthcare is dealt with here. Comparatively, just over a third of a similar UK sample chose the healthcare sector. Over half of Scots ranked the cost of living next, and independence stands at 17%, below the economy and immigration. Education is 7th on the list. So many are no closer to deciding, and time is running out.
Well, as you heard there from Ashna's report, despite being a devolved issue, according to our polling, health is the biggest issue for voters here in Scotland. Public services top of so many people's priority lists in this general election. Don't need me to talk about that. Education as well. Leanne Maguire is here to talk about education. She's a parent and chair of Glasgow City Parents Group, and Mike McCurdy, president of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Glasgow. Hello to you both. Oh, it's all gone quiet as you two start to talk. This is good. People are interested in health and education. Mike, if I could come to you first. Your organisation has written an open letter to MPs, basically saying, this is what we need and this is your chance to tell us your plans. Tell us a bit more about what you think health in Scotland needs to not just survive, but to thrive.
So the first thing is to get the workforce right, Sarah-Jane. We need to have people to deliver services, doctors, nurses, other health professionals. And at the moment we have vacancies in all of these roles. We're not training enough people to come into those roles. And we're losing people at the other end who no longer want to work in the health service, and we're not retaining our staff. So we've made that very clear in our open letter that workforce is a #1 issue. The people who are in the health service, their well-being and their capacity to do their work is not as good as it might be. So we're asking MPs to consider how we look after the workforce we have. That will not only retain them, we hope, in the health service, but also give them greater capacity to deliver good, compassionate care. If we look more widely beyond that, we need to have better facilities to do our work. That means, to some extent, more kit, more buildings, more operating theatres, but also good IT, and with that, good leadership to help us improve patient flow and improve the productivity of what we do and how we deliver our services. And we've made that very clear in our ask also. And the third stream of our ask is to consider what we sometimes call the wider determinants of health. So we're here speaking in the East End of Glasgow. This is one of the poorest parts of Scotland, one of the poorest parts of the UK. A boy born in this part of Glasgow, this part of Scotland, will live on average for 25 years less than a boy born in a leafier part of Scotland or the UK. And that's what we term health inequalities. And we've asked all political parties to consider what they might do to improve the outcome for everybody in our community.
Some big asks, some important questions. That Pooch over there agrees with what you've said. What about the answers? You know, we're a week to go to polling day. Do you feel that you've heard any of the answers you need from any of the parties involved?
I think to some extent all parties are now recognising the workforce issue. So they do understand that there needs to be, and all parties have signed up to some form of workforce planning and increased numbers and increased training opportunities. I'm not sure everybody's quite tuned into the issue about the mood and morale of those people who are working in the health service and their own well-being. I think there's been some discussion of that, but not a lot. I think on the issue of facilities and how we do our work, I think, in fairness to politicians, they probably think that we should be able to work that out within the health service to some extent. And on the wider determinants of health and health inequalities, I don't think that's been much talked about at all. And the things that we would encourage everybody to do about their own health, about diet and exercise, what we eat, what we do in our own health behaviours. I don't think they've been much part of the discussion. The other slightly frustrating thing is that to some extent you want to ask the politicians to show us they're working when they say they're going to create so many thousand new appointments or so many thousand new doctors. These are quite easy things to say, but behind those numbers there's a great deal of complexity.
Makes good headlines, Leanne, let's move it on to education. You and I were talking before we came on air, you know, education, health, other public services can't be separated. They're all linked. It's all a big public health issue. Talk to me about the state of education here in Scotland and what the pressing issues for you are that need to be addressed.
Yeah, so for probably about the last 18 months, we have seen a rise in school absences, and that's being classed as emotionally based non-school attendance. So we're not talking about truancy here, we're talking about kids really struggling with attending school, so they're off for long periods and they need support with that. We had a Scottish Government inquiry recently about additional support for learning and how the evidence supported the fact that needs are not being met in that sector. And then we also have issues like challenging behaviour and recruitment of teachers, particularly around specialist subjects. So it just feels like there's one thing after another happening in education at the moment. Not many solutions are being put forward. And so I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that education is in crisis.
Leanne, I'm going to put a question to you that I know you'll bite on. People will say, what can be done about this? This is a general election. Education and health are devolved issues.
Yeah, so it's all linked to Westminster, as MPs and politicians constantly tell us. Whenever I'm trying to ask the questions about what Scottish Government can do for education, we're constantly reminded
well, it's Westminster's fault that we're limited with our money, which then translates onto councils being limited, which I absolutely get, not naive to that. However, children can't wait for that to be solved. We need solutions now. Children are being failed right now in our classrooms, and we can't keep waiting for independence to come. We can't keep waiting to beg Westminster for more money in the hope that that will come. These are not guaranteed answers. So we need the people that are in power making the decisions to create real solutions now that are going to help children in school now.
And I know you have a daughter of school age, soon to leave that part of the education system and go on to college. And there are problems there as well, out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Yeah, so the last 4 years we've had a lot of disruption in schools with the pandemic. In Scotland we had very, very long period of school strike action for teachers, for pay. And there's been other kind of minor disruptions as well across school. So my daughter's now leaving S6. She missed a huge part of S5 and S6 because she struggled going back after the pandemic. She now has possible, she's getting put forward for an assessment for possible autism. And so she was looking forward to starting her college journey in September, fresh start, new environment. And we now have a crisis in further education where we are seeing massive strikes across with college lecturers on pay disputes.
I just want to read you something from the SNP, because obviously these are devolved issues, but particularly on education. And the SNP say, despite facing unprecedented cuts from Westminster, the Scottish Government has ensured that Scotland's schools remain by far the best funded in the UK, with the highest level of school spend per pupil anywhere in the UK. In Scotland, we invest more per pupil, and we have the most teachers per pupil of any part of the UK, along with the highest number of pupil support staff on record.
These figures are all good and well, but what I would say, particularly in Glasgow, I can speak to the most, that's my kind of specialism. We are continuing to see rising child poverty in this city. We've got the highest child poverty in the country. That is linked to the attainment gap then, because you have the poverty attainment gap. So it's all fine and well comparing us to other nations, but again we need to address what's happening in our nation and how we're helping our young people in Scotland, and those stats don't seem to line up with what's happening across
Mike,
our
it comes
local
back to what
authorities.
you were saying in health. It's all very well and good having these stats and these headlines, but you need to come and see it for yourself.
Yes, and there are some special circumstances in Scotland which we do need to be taken into account. If you look at, so I think what Leanna said about child poverty and the impact that that has on education, similarly poverty has an impact on health and delivery of healthcare. There's something about also the physicality of Scotland. We're about 8% of the Scottish population, but 1/3 of the landmass. We have more inhabited islands. We have to deliver healthcare and education to remote and rural communities. So there are some special, particular circumstances in Scotland which need to be taken into account.
Well, Mike and Leanne, thank you so much for talking to us here on the UK tonight. We're trying to cram so much into an hour. There's so much more to talk about, and we will in the 7 days leading up to the general election and beyond. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
So to come here on the programme, I'm going to be speaking to a personal finance expert and a business owner about the issue that's affecting everyone in this election, and that, of course, is the cost of living. Hello, welcome back to the UK Tonight. We are live in Glasgow with just 1 week to go now until the general election. As we've toured the nations of the UK during this election campaign, we've been speaking to people about the specific issues facing them. But there's one issue in this election that has come up time and time again, affecting people all over the UK, and that is the cost of living. Well, I'm joined now by Adele Prendergast, a personal finance expert who runs Your Pay, Your Way social enterprise to help people with their personal finances and provide financial education. And Alex Riches, who is the operations manager at this wonderful music and arts venue we're in, St Luke's and the Winged Ox. I'm just sweet talking you because even though it is wonderful, we've turned the music down, so sorry everyone, I'm very conscious of that. But let's start by talking about the cost of living. It affects everyone, whether you're a business owner, and an employer, or a young person, elderly families. It touches us all. Let's talk about the people that you first started helping. And you were giving financial education to younger people.
Yeah.
But you really tapped into something because, as I said, it affects everyone, and more people were coming to you for help.
Absolutely.
What were they telling you?
So we started, when we started Your Pay, Your Way, it was aimed at particularly young people who were in sort of the end of high school, because we thought that was the right place for people to learn about money. And what happened was during during the pandemic, when people started to realise, I don't really know what to do. There was no resilience in people when it came to finances, that we realised that actually we were going to have to branch out. We were asked to work with families, we were asked to work with older people, people that were sort of in their 20s who thought they knew what they were doing with money, were suddenly lost their income and didn't really know how to react to that. So that really was the catalyst for us moving away from primarily young people.
So you're helping people to navigate it the best they can. But what help can government give to them to make their life that little bit easier? Because as I've been talking to all my guests tonight, you know, these big policy launches, these sort of big ideas, it's the minutiae of it, it's the small day-to-day detail that people need help with.
I think one of the problems is that governments think that if they throw money at problems, it fixes it. And nobody really works backwards and says, well, what is the root cause of this problem? We did that, and we worked out that when you leave school, you don't know how to open a bank account because nobody has taught you how to do that. So I think that they need to start looking at the bigger picture rather than just coming up with policies, giving it a fancy name, throw some money at it. Does it help long term, or should we be looking at the root cause?
Look at something a bit more simple.
Yeah.
Okay. Alex, let's talk about running a music and arts venue in the current climate. What is that like, and what kind of help do you need?
So it's definitely interesting. We've obviously seen crowds dwindle with kind of pressure from bigger audiences, bigger promotions going on, bigger concerts. Obviously, people's money doesn't go quite as far, so they don't have the same money to come and spend on an experience, or as often on an experience. You've got to really be precious and make sure the experience here is, you know, absolutely paramount when they do come down. So it's really reinvesting back into guest experience, make sure that the experience when they're here is just the best it possibly can be to keep return business coming. But so it's very difficult if people haven't got the money in their pocket to come and buy something to start with.
Yeah. Because you have a responsibility to the people who walk through this door as a customer, who are all sitting here having something to eat, a drink, and there's an open mic night after we've come off air, turn the music back on. But you've also got a responsibility to your staff as well, because they're feeling the same kind of pinch that the people walking through the front door are feeling.
Absolutely. So it's right from the bottom up. So we've got 75 members of staff across the company, and we've seen all the aspects of it, from like problems with mental health, problems with the money, problems with flow coming through. It's been really difficult. It's a big operation to try and look after that many, especially young kind of minds. And it's difficult. Obviously, minimum wage is going up, national living wage is going up, cost of goods are going up as a result. So it's just this constant battle. We need a kind of longer term solution to what's happening at the moment. So we really need a solid change in the regime.
I really do feel like we need to get that pooch on the show. It's desperate to be part of our panel. It's barking with all the good stuff. And it's also important to point out that when we talk about particularly young people and the cost of living, the phrase you hear is just, oh, we'll just cut back on things like going out for a pint or going to see a band. Why should they? It's so important, isn't it, for this to be something that isn't a luxury, it's enjoyment. It's also part of the community. You walk around this part of Glasgow, and this is an integral part of the community here.
culturally, I mean, live music's such an important part to the whole of the UK. I mean, if the Cavern Club didn't have the Beatles back in the day, if Oasis didn't play King Tut's to launch those bands, they wouldn't exist. You know, you look at things like the Taylor Swift shows that have just been, you know, they're amazing that these massive shows are coming, but without a grassroots sector here to look after that and really bring it through, you know, that whole thing will be gone. You know, Ed Sheeran's venues, so played 366 venues in the UK at grassroots level. 150 of those are now closed due to the rise of costs. A venue's closing at a rate of 1 a week at the moment. We can't stimulate the market like that. We really need to just get on top of it. We need a solid solution back out of this, a plan to reinvigorate the kind of grassroots scene and really put the money back into it.
Okay. Adele, a final thought from you. Have you heard anything throughout this general election campaign where you sat up from whatever party it is and thought, that's something that could genuinely help the people that I talk to and educate about their finance?
If I'm being completely honest, no.
Nothing at all? Nothing.
I haven't really heard anything that we haven't heard before. And that's the disappointing thing about it, if I'm being completely honest.
Alex, I'll give that question to you as well. As a business owner, music, arts, anything that you've heard in this general election campaign that you've thought, I'd vote for you because that's actually going to affect my life and my livelihood?
Everything is so muddied out there. There's nobody that seems to be like pulling ahead in the race for me. There's nothing that is really invigorating me or really kind of making me feel that we need to go that direction with someone. There's nothing that seems that's going to be a quick turn or a quick fix for anything. Not that there is a quick fix out there, but
no, there isn't a quick fix. But you know, you need to feel like they're talking to you. If they want to win your vote, you need to feel like they're talking directly to you. Okay, Adele Prendergast and Alex Ritchie, thank you so much for your time, and Alex, thank you so much for hosting us tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So to come here on the UK tonight, we're going to take a tour of Glasgow's murals, and there are some absolute beauties on the streets of Glasgow. Some of the best street art to be found anywhere in the UK. And as I keep saying, we are 1 week out from polling day. I'm going to be finding out if the people of Glasgow believe this election will bring about change.
This exhibition left Ukraine in November of 2022, in the midst of the war, when Kyiv was constantly bombarded. And our idea was to show this art to European public, and at the same time to take it out of harm waste. That was a very complicated operation, I have to tell you, because we made a mistake, because we thought that we are very smart. Russians were bombing Kyiv every week on Monday, and we decided that we will go on Tuesday. And of course, that Tuesday was the most intensive bombardment of the whole Ukrainian territory. Fortunately, our trucks left Kyiv before this bombardment started. By the end of the day, they reached Polish border. We were ready to open champagne. And in this moment, some straight rocket exploded at the Polish territory. You remember probably that incident, and everybody decided that it's the beginning of the Third World War. Poles closed the border, and our trucks stayed on the border. So it was unbelievable diplomatic effort. Ukrainian diplomats worked telephones. Fortunately, nobody slept in Poland on that night. And in the morning, Polish authorities just flagged our trucks to Polish territory, and they reached Madrid on time. We started in Madrid, then this exhibition came to Cologne, then to the Royal Museum of Fine Arts in Brussels, then to Vienna. In Vienna, it was enlarged 2 times. Then we divided this exhibition. It's made chronologically, so we created know-how of exhibition which could be, you know, separated or attached together. And one part of it, we opened exhibition last week in the National Gallery of Slovakia, and this week people could see it in London. It's covering the first half of the 20th century, from the beginning to 1930s.
Now, as any proud Glaswegian will tell you, the city has some of the best street art in the UK. The first of the city's murals appeared back in 2008 and was soon followed by plenty others, many of them in places that were neglected. They are the work of local artists, and they have become so popular there is an official mural trail here in the city featuring more than 30 pieces of art. So we see one of Glasgow's most favourite sons there, Billy Connolly. Well, joining me now is artist Ali Smith, who helps develop these murals from an idea to something that becomes a real centrepiece in the city's landscape. Ali, hello.
Hi there.
I have had a wander around Glasgow today, and you turn a corner and in the most unexpected places is something quite incredible. This came about in 2008, and it was part of a plan to reinvigorate Glasgow. What happened from there? Because it really took off.
Yeah, I guess it started from a place of, driven by regeneration, and targeting areas that were vandalised or just derelict spaces, and so many landlords have got right behind it and really supported it over the years, and it's been fantastic, and it just adds so much to the value, the fabric of the city. So it's been a great success, I think. So,
what are some of your favourites? It's probably really hard to choose.
Yeah, I mean,
Are You Dancing is one that I've seen that I really like.
Yeah, Are You Dancing's great. The Bubbles in Renfield Lane by Rogue One is a fantastic, beautifully painted piece, just fun and simple, and I guess takes people back to happy places. The old hand shadow puppets down at Cowcaddens. I'm not sure if that's on your reel, but another classic by Rogue One or so. There's so many fantastic artists that have contributed over the years. So,
and you work with the local artists. Do they design the concept? Do you talk about what's going on in the city? What's the connection between the art and the city of Glasgow?
Glasgow's always sort of punched above its weight in terms of arts and culture, and I think for us it's about finding opportunities for artists to come out and to work with the council, or work with landlords, work with whoever's willing to fund the projects. And some artists come with ideas, some people come with ideas. It's just a big melting pot of whatever it may be, with that agenda of just getting something up in the walls to entertain. So,
and the trail is very popular. People come and take a tour of the streets, get to know the city and see the art. Are there plans for more?
I think there always is. There's pieces popping up all the time. So, always looking forward to seeing what's coming up. I know we've got some things in the works that should go down well if we do it right. And there's plenty of others that are doing some fantastic things too. So,
okay. Well, pun the pun, but watch this space. Ali, that was a dog like that. I got a bark from the dog when I said something. Ali Smith, really good to meet you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
For talking us through some of Glasgow's murals, as we said, some of the finest pieces of street art in the UK right here in this city. Now, if the polls are to be believed, Labour is heading for a majority in Westminster, and as we heard earlier, a YouGov poll for Sky News suggests that the party will win the most seats here in Scotland. But can a new government actually improve people's lives here? I went out into the city centre of Glasgow a little earlier today to find out if people believe that this election will bring about change for them. Do you think what happens this time next week will change anything for the people of Scotland and for your life in particular?
I don't think so, I personally don't. I think we have a choice in between the best of two evils.
I don't know if anyone's particularly excited. I don't see a climate of there's a big wall of change happening. I don't think anyone's expecting much.
Are you still going to vote the same? Has it moved the dial for you?
Well, I've registered to vote this time, but I'm still not really sure on who to vote for, because they all kind of seem a bit out of touch.
You feel like they're talking more to your parents than to you?
Because it's all about what's been done before and who's taxpayers' money and things, whereas where our main concern is property ladders, the national service.
I'm Spanish. I've lived in the UK and in Scotland for 18 years, so when I hear a lot of the stuff that I hear about immigration, it really scares me.
I think the main thing would be cost of living. As a young adult, being introduced to things such as council tax, being fully responsible for myself financially as well.
I think it's hard for people to decide who to vote for this time around. Speaking to someone just the other day, she had been knocking on doors and saying lots of people are saying we don't know who to vote for, and it is tricky, but I'd like change at least.
Well, thank you to the good people of Glasgow for talking to me today. Our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis is here for a final thought, because it's so hard to cram everything into an hour, Conor.
Yeah.
But where do we go from here? 7 days to go.
Well, Scotland is at a crossroads politically. We've had the Euros, which has been a big story up here,
Yeah.
and the Scottish schools are now on holiday as well for the vote next week. But look, the SNP, the polls are suggesting a big drop. We talked about where those votes could potentially go, and the big question will be, if it is a UK Labour government next week, where will that put the question of Scottish independence that's different to where the Conservatives were over the past 12 to 13 years. But either way, this is a big moment and a test of what could come ahead, and the battle line's been drawn for the 2026 Holyrood elections here in Scotland.
OK, Conor, thank you. Thank you for hosting me on Your Manor. We'll switch the music back on here at this music and arts venue in the city centre of Glasgow. It's open mic night after we finish. You fancy it, Conor? We'll turn the cameras off. That's all for us on the UK Tonight, this special programme from Glasgow. Hope you've enjoyed it. You can catch up on the highlights on our webpage. We'll see you tomorrow.